Hello and welcome to part 2 of From Zero to Hero teaching you C++. In the last episode we learned how to make a basic project that prints Hello World. Today we will be learning about classes. What are classes, you might ask? A class is a set of variables and or functions. If you can imagine a car as a class, then that class would include variables like car registration, its make and model, and functions like accelerate. You can choose to either create a new program in the same way as we did in the previous video, or you can just edit your existing. I'll be editing the program from part 1. So first and foremost, let's add a new class to our project. Now the quickest way to do that is to click here, add new class, and now we will have to add in our name of our class, which we will call TextObject. Then just click create. It will ask you if you want to add them to your project again, click yes. And what targets these should be added to, so release and debug is fine, keep those and click yes. In Visual Studio, the action of adding a class is very similar, if not a little bit more simple than this, so you shouldn't have much trouble if you are using that. So as you can see now, we should have a couple new files that have been added to the project, textobject.h and textobject.cpp. If you open up the textobject.h, it should look something like this. If you're in Visual Studio, it will look a little bit different. So you may be asking, what's a header? In C++, headers are very commonplace. They usually hold definitions for classes and declarations for variables and functions that class owns. I imagine that you've heard me use the terms definitions and declarations a few times now. So to put it simply, a declaration is telling the compiler that this object will exist, but not what it does just yet, and the definition is saying what that declaration will do. So an example of this is if we were to say that we've got a function called void print screen. We are declaring that there will be a function called void print screen there, and here we are defining that void print screen does this code. So let's have a look at what is in that header file. First we have these if n def or if not defined and define. These are called include guards. If you remember back to part 1, we included IOStream. Now imagine if IOStream had inside of it a class called Bob. If you do not have include guards, then whenever you include IOStream, it would try and define what Bob is. But if you've included that file more than once, Bob will already be defined. This is the reason for having guards. What they do is make sure that the code will only be run once. An include guard itself is very simple. If we break it down, the first section says if n def. This is short for if not defined. The second is define. So the first time you include this file, it will say has text object underscore h, this variable here, not been defined yet. If so, then define it now. Next time you include that file, it will ask, has textObject.h been defined? In which it has been defined, so it won't run the rest of the code. That may be a little bit confusing for now, but when you start to understand a little bit more about C++ and programming in general, it will start to make a lot more sense. Next we have class TextObject. This is saying that we are creating a class called TextObject. Next we have our opening brace to start the definition of the class. Next we have public. Now this is an access modifier. There are 3 access modifiers: public, private, and protected. Public means the code following will be visible by the rest of your code. Private means that this class will be the only thing that has access to the following code. And protected is a little bit more confusing, so I'll discuss it later. Next we have text object open close brackets. This is what's known as a constructor. A constructor is a function that will be called when you create an instance of that object. It automatically gets called and it's generally used for setting data that the object needs. Next we have the destructor. This, in a similar way to the constructor, gets automatically called. However, this will be called when the class is removed from memory. I'll explain more about this in a later video. You will see that the destructor also has the keyword virtual. This is similar to protected and is a little bit more confusing, and I'll discuss it again in a later video. So now we're going to write some functions. First, we're going to need a function that will return a string. This will be called getText, and it will take no parameters. The difference here from when we have created our previous functions is that we will not write the body yet. It will be public and will look something like this. Next, we want a function that returns nothing, so void. This will be called setString and will take a string called newText as a parameter. This will look something like this. And finally, we want a function that returns nothing. It will be called print and will take no parameters. The last thing we need to do in this file is add a member variable. If you remember the previous episode where we created a simple integer, we will do similar in this file, but this time it will be a string called m_text. The m underscore at the beginning is not mandatory. It does make it very easy when your code base gets a little more complicated to know that this variable is part of this class and is not local or global to the rest of the program. You should note that this is in the private section. This means that this variable will only be visible from this class and not the rest of our code. Okay, next we'll move on to our CPP file. So, as you can see, this file is already including our text object header file. This is good. As we are going to be implementing our code for text object in this file, we need access to the header file. So next we're going to have to include IOStream. We're going to need this later in the code because we're going to be doing output in this class to the window. Next we'll have to implement the functions that we declared in our header file. These are getText, setString, and print. Generally what I like doing is copying what we have in the header file into the CPP file so we know what we're working towards. So firstly, getText. So this function will be returning our member variable m_text. This function returns a string. Here we need to be a little bit careful. The code already knows that we will have a function called getText. We just haven't told it what it does yet. If we write out just getText function now, it will think that we are trying to overwrite the function that we've already declared in the header file. So how do we get about that? Well, if you remember what I said at the end of part 1 about namespaces, a class is technically its own namespace. So if we type text object : in front of getText, we'll actually gain access to everything that text object has in its namespace. So we'll not be overriding getText, we'll actually be defining our getText from our header file. So now we're going to write our code. So the next line will open our scope, like normal, and write return m_text. This will return mtext to whatever called this function. The next function to write is setString. So this function is going to set mtext to what we pass it as our parameter. So similar to getText, we need to add the text object : in front of setText to tell it that we're changing the existing one from the header file, not overwriting it with a new one. Open our scope, and we need to assign mText to new text. So m_text equals new text. And finally, we need to write print. So again, the same as the other two functions, we need text object : in front of print. And in this function, all we're going to do is see out our mText. So see out m_text. And don't forget to put the .c_str underscore to get the array of characters, not the object itself. So that's pretty much all we need in our text object CPP. So if we go back to main, so what we're going to do here is we're going to include text object This will gain access to being able to create a text object. You might want to note that this is in speech marks as opposed to the less than and greater than signs. The reason for this is because text object is local to our project. It's not external code that we need to access differently. So anything you create inside of your own project, you should be able to access with just speech marks instead of using the greater than and less than signs. So now we're going to create two text objects. This is very similar to creating any other variable. We simply go text object and we give it a name. The first one that we're going to name is going to be called hello. And the second one we're going to create is going to be called world. A note here is that at this point is when the constructor of these objects will be called. So next we're going to call the function setString from both of these to give them the string we want them to print out. So for hello, we would do hello dot. So a dot is how you access functions or anything public from an object that you have. So we can access getText, print, and setText. We're going to access setText now, and we're going to pass it hello with a semicolon at the end. And for world, we're going to do the same. We're going to access setText, and we're going to pass it world. Next, we are going to print the hello object to the screen. So we've made a print function, we just need to access that. So hello.print, which takes no parameters, so open close brackets. We will then put a space in between, so we'll do cout with a space. And next we're going to print out world. So we call world.print and with a semicolon at the end. Finally, we're just going to add a new line, which is end L. We won't need print string for example anymore, and we will keep cin.get because that will halt the program so it doesn't just exit straight away, and return 0 because this function has successfully finished. We also won't need print string or the declaration of print string anymore. So if we were to run this function now, it won't work. The reason is because we've used string, but at this current point we don't know what string is. We haven't used the standard library, so we'd have to add in std : and std : in our text object.cpp we'll have to do similar to all the things that are in the standard library. And then if we try and run again, we missed one in the header file, so we'll put that in there and run again. And you'll see that it still hasn't worked. Again, we have accessed the standard namespace, but it doesn't know what a string is. Even though we're accessing the namespace of the standard library, string hasn't been defined yet. So to do this, we're just going to include string directly. The reason we haven't had to do that in our main previously is because we included IOStream, which I believe has string included in it. So we'll save that and run again. And as you can see, the output is the same as last lesson. So that was a lot to take in. I can understand if you're a little bit confused. But in the next lesson, we will go through classes more and show a lot more of a realistic example of how you would use one. And hopefully that will clear up a lot of questions. If you do have any questions, then please ask in the comments. I'll try and answer them as soon as I can. And if enough people ask the same question, I'll make a video about it. So yes, as I said, next lesson we will continue with classes. I'll try and show you why making many classes can be very useful, but at the same time the problems that can be introduced by doing so.